Chapter 1. The World Standard, God's Choice. That day, the wind in Bethlehem felt no different than any other day. The father called his oldest sons one by one. On a day like this, there was no reason to call the youngest. Tending the sheep was the lowest, most trivial task. Yet God, even in the most critical moments, seeks out the smallest of them all. Inside the house, men stood in line, while out in the field, a young boy, completely unaware, simply watched over his sheep. The world had forgotten him, but God was already calling David by name. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7. But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. This is who God says you truly are. I trust God's choice over the world's standards, and I live today, unnoticed by others, preparing for the call. Chapter 2. The School of Ordinary Life. The palace was still too far away. The crown was not yet on his head, but held within God's promise. David went right back to the fields. He was anointed, but reality hadn't changed a bit. He still drove the sheep. He was still alone, and still no one called him king. But God was teaching him how to live like a king, before teaching him how to be one. People called those fields a mundane, ordinary day, but God called that time the School of Kings. Psalm 78 verses 70 to 71. He chose David also his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. From following the ewes great with young he brought him to feed Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. Stand firm on this truth today. I will remain faithful to the small tasks God entrusts to me, embracing the hidden moments as the very process that builds my calling. Chapter 3. Courage in the Hidden Place. That day too was just another ordinary day. The sheep grazed quietly, knowing nothing, but the wilderness, as it always does, brought a sudden, unannounced trial. The roar of a lion, the footprint of a bear. If I ran, I could save my own life, but David valued the lives entrusted to him more than his own. No one was there to witness the scene, but God did not forget the courage of that day. 1 Samuel 17 verses 34 to 35. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. Declare this in faith. I will fulfill my responsibilities to the end, even in places where no one is watching. Building God's prepared tomorrow with today's faithfulness. Chapter 4. A Vision that Overcomes Fear. On the battlefield, there were countless soldiers. There were swords, there were spears, and there was armor. Yet the one thing they needed most was missing: faith. While everyone else spoke of how massive Goliath was, only one boy remembered how great God is. In that very moment, the battle was decided long before the stone was thrown. 1 Samuel 17 verse 45. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Let your faith echo louder than your fear. I will not look at the giant before me, but at the God who is with me, stepping forward boldly toward my calling in faith. Chapter 5. The Promise and the Patience of the Next Day. Shouts of victory echoed through the entire city. The songs began. People chanted David's name. But one man did not hear those songs as a blessing. In Saul's heart, comparison, not gratitude, began to grow. From that day on, David became a hero, but at the same time, his long journey toward the wilderness began. God's calling is always prepared, with patience before praise. 1 Samuel 18 verse 7. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Now declare this word over your life. I will not be intoxicated by human praise, nor will I be broken by human misunderstanding. faithfully walking the path God leads me on to the very end. Chapter 6. Faith that waits for the promise. It was after that day. The oil was poured onto David's head, but still no one called him king. The fields remained the same, and the sheep remained the same. God, after giving a promise, does not grant immediate results, because a promise, through the waiting, transforms a person down to their very core. David did not boast of his anointing. He silently drove the sheep once again. Perhaps true faith starts not on the day we receive God's promise, but on the next day, when absolutely nothing seems to happen. Psalm 27 verse 14. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Stand firm on this truth today. I will not rush God's promise out of impatience, trusting even the waiting as the hand of God shaping who I am. Chapter 7. The Worshipper Who Shakes the Darkness. One day laughter faded from the palace. It was a grand royal court, but peace was nowhere to be found. Saul could not sleep, and his servants could only look at the king, unable to do a thing. Then someone thought of a young boy, not a man skilled with a sword, but a man who carried the presence of God. The world was looking for someone with skill, but God was sending a worshiper. That day, the sound of a shepherd's harp quietly began to shake the darkness of the palace. 1 Samuel 16 verse 23. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. Receive this truth. I will let peace flow wherever I stay by living a life aligned with God, allowing my very presence to be a place of rest for others. Chapter 8. The core that sustains the position. The palace felt unfamiliar. The boy who used to walk with sheep in the fields now stood before the king. Yet David did not make the palace his ultimate goal. He wasn't looking at the king, he was looking at God. That is why he didn't grow proud when placed in high positions, nor did he despair when sent back to the lowest places. People say the position makes the man, but God was teaching David that it is the inner core that allows a man to sustain the position, attains the position. Colossians 3 verse 23. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. Attains the position. Now declare what God says about you. Attains the position. I will handle today's tasks as an offering to God rather than seeking human recognition, choosing a faithfulness that remains unchanged in any position. Attains the position. Chapter 9. A calling hidden in the ordinary. Attains the position. The camp was already buzzing with energy. Soldiers hurried between tents, the clank of armor echoed around, and voices grew loud everywhere. Everyone was moving, finding their place. Everyone, except for one young shepherd boy. David hadn't come to fight. He was just there to deliver lunch. Bread and cheese. A simple errand. That morning nothing looked extraordinary. But heaven always hides its greatest moments inside the most mundane routines. Long before David faced the giant, he first chose to be faithful to the small task his father gave him. Sometimes the door to your greatest calling presents itself as just another ordinary day. Attains the position. 1 Samuel 17 verse 20. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. Attains the position. Declare this over your life today. Attains the position. I will never undervalue the worth of simple obedience. For God conceals his grand purposes within our quiet faithfulness. Attains the position. Chapter 10. Ears that hear something else. Attains the position. For 40 days the giant shouted. Morning after morning, evening after evening. His voice echoed through the entire valley. The soldiers heard fear, and Saul heard defeat. But David heard something else entirely. He heard the voice of a man, defying the name of the living God. The exact same words reached everyone's ears, but there was only one heart that refused to accept them. The victory was decided long before the stone left David's hand. The moment he resolved that God's glory mattered more than his own safety, the battle was already won. Tains the position. 1 Samuel 17 verse 26. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Tains the position. Let God's truth become your confession today. Tains the position. I will not let fear control my vision. I will look past every problem to see the greatness and faithfulness of my God. Tains the position. Take a quiet moment to share that one sentence that stayed in your heart today. Your confession might be the very courage someone else needs as they hold on to the same word. We will build up your true identity, the one God speaks over you.